My name is Bill Evans. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager for the City of Wilsonville, and I appreciate you all spending a little time to come out here tonight. To get us started, I will introduce the Vice Chair of our committee, Karla, who certainly knows a lot more about the speaker than I do.
Yes, thank you, Bill. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Karla Brashear. I have been a resident of Wilsonville since 2019, actually. I also work as an immigration attorney, and I thought one of the topics that would be great to share for the DEI committee would be on immigration. And essentially, this is an election year. It's going to be a big topic in the news. All of the crisis that we have at the southern border, and asylum and immigrants coming into the country. So I will speak on that, and as far as the law goes and what is going on there and what I expect will happen in the future. But when we were discussing this topic, I realized that a much better story would be of an immigrant who actually did that, who came because of persecution and needed to find refuge in the United States. And I, of course, thought of my mother, which is a huge reason, not only why I'm here today, but also why I'm an immigration attorney. Why I am the mom, wife, sister, everything, volunteer that I am is obviously because of the way I was raised and my mom, who's my personal hero. So I cannot wait for her to share this story with you. What we will do is I will have her discuss her story. I do want to make it very clear, she did not come to this country with asylum. She actually migrated to this country through her mom, who is a lawful permanent resident of the United States. I'll explain a little bit more about that later, depending on how much time we have after her story, which is first and foremost much more interesting than anything I have to say about United States immigration policy. So, without further ado, the most beautiful woman I have ever met, my mom, Elizabeth.
Okay, hope you guys don't get bored and fall asleep, but I'll tell you, my name is Lillian Elizabeth Brashear. I was born in El Salvador, and my parents are Angel and Marta Molina, who still live in El Salvador, by the way. My mother was born into a very, very wealthy family, so our story is unlike any other story. My parents, my grandparents, my mother's side of the family owned thousands of acreage in our country. They were known to be one of the 7 families that actually owned El Salvador. My grandfather married my grandmother, and the 2 families were then even wealthier than you can imagine. My father wasn't as fortunate. His mother was a maid in the house where having an affair with, let's say, the owner of that home, right? And he was born to that family. My grandfather from my father's side had some money, but not like my mother's side. Never did. They met. My grandfather from my mom's side's goal was to get her away from him because he wasn't to the same level of society. So at that time, in the 1950s, you could purchase a green card. So he, with his wealth, bought her green card so he could get her away from him. She came to United States, but went back and ended up with my father. They got married. My grandfather could not deal with the situation. It was in the society of his daughters marrying someone like him. He took his life at that time. And left everything he owned to his wife, right? They were 7 kids, 2 boys, 5 girls. After my grandfather had passed away, my grandmother obviously inherited thousands of acreage that they owned, and that's how the wealth was that they inherited. My mother tells us stories that when she was going to the farm, from their home to their farm, that the train, the minute that their family took that train, no one could go into that train, only their family and their maids and their servants. So it was even above and beyond, even when I was raised with the family. So growing up, we grew up with at least 5, 6 maids in the home, a driver, a landscaper. We had it all. After my grandfather passed, we lived with my grandma because my mother's relationship with her mother was so close. She would not want to leave her. The house was 7 bedrooms, courtyard, gazebo in the courtyard. What we call a back patio where we had mango trees and guava trees and you name it. I mean, it's so hard to describe. And the maids and the nannies and there were servants for everything, right? To the point where when we went to school, we had the servants washing and pressing our clothes every morning and waking us up with everything done, and our shoes shine every night. I remember the servants sitting with all the shoes every night and having to shine them before we went to school, and everything was done for us. I never, ever, ever made my bed, or we were sitting and playing with our cousins and we wanted water, and you call the maid, I want a glass of water, or can you bring it? And you leave, spoiled to the limits, sad to say. After my grandfather passed, obviously all that land was passed down to my grandmother. In our country and the culture back in the day, the boys really inherit most of everything, right? But they were helping my grandma manage the land and manage everything. We would go and visit the land with the cousins and have horses and ride horses and pretend that we were gonna milk the cows. And it was, again, almost a movie kind of a life that I can remember, and it brings me back. As we were writing all of this, it was bringing me back to a life that I have forgotten about, because it's been so long. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had that. And Karla did ask, she said, Mom, did you feel privileged at that time? How did you feel growing up in that life? And I'm like, you know what? I didn't even realize it. It was my life. We went to private schools. We had the driver take us to the school and pick us up, and the landscapers taking care of the land, and again, the maids to our demand. So we never thought anything of it. It was life in my country. It was what we were used to. My mother was, her stress in her life was to manage the maids and to tell them what to cook that day, what we were gonna eat. Oh my gosh, what are we gonna make today, right? The stress of the house being clean, the sheets were changed every day. It was almost like a hotel, and not just change every day, they had to press the sheets and make the beds and have everything ready for us, right? So another life, another world. In the 1970s, the war started, and didn't think anything of it. People were fighting. We started by their saying the poor are fighting for their rights. The rich have everything they have because it's been passed down to them, and we want what they have. My parents said, I remember them talking and saying, yeah, but they don't know how to manage it. They're not educated enough to manage it, right? But it was just talk and, okay, and fights, shotguns were going on the streets as everything progressed, and living in a home where the shootings were coming by and you heard them closer and the cops yelling and screaming, get down on the floor. And we would go either hiding into a room or under beds or on the floor, and you hear them screaming and yelling and the shots going on, and then you come out after everything calmed down and you see dead bodies, right? And sometimes people that were just standing by that had nothing to do with it, or either party, right? So how traumatizing could have that been for us? We were like scared and, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? How do you live like this? And you never knew from a day-to-day basis what was gonna happen. Up to a day where we had someone come to our home and ask, where is Mr. Molina? And in our country, you're accustomed the maids to answer the door. You never, ever answer the door. The maids go, and they say, well, he's not home yet. He's at the farm. And they said, well, where is Mrs. Molina? And she will not come to the door unless she knows who's coming to the door. And she said, well, she's not available. And he says, well, you need to give him a message. And the message is that he either gives up their land or we're going to kill their family. And we're going to come back and we're going to take care of it. At that same time, there were obviously on the news lots of kidnapping, which at one point we ended up with bodyguards, let's say, because we were fearful of what was happening and what was going to happen to our family. But as kids, we didn't know the level of until that message came into play. My dad then, he wasn't home. The maid went to the kitchen and gave my mother the message, and she would not come to the door. Said, tell him you got the message. We'll let my husband know. And Dad came home later that day. We gave him the message, and he said, well, we everybody pack one bag, and we're leaving. We're gonna go. We're gonna run away. And we're like, where? He said, United States. We're going to United States. We had no idea what United States, why, where, how, right? And as we're packing at the time, 15, 16 years old, 5 siblings, 3 daughters, 2 boys. My baby brother was 6 years old. My oldest sister was 17. I was the second oldest, 15, turning 16. We were all in panic. We had boyfriends. I think that was my fear. Oh my gosh, my boyfriend. Sorry, honey. I'm leaving him. So it was the crying of, I think that I was more fearful of that than I was to run away. But we had to pack our bags and got in the car, and I remember leaving at 3, 4 in the morning, putting everything in there and saying, okay, we're leaving, we're going, and started driving, not knowing where is it really we're going, and how 5 kids in one station wagon, and how are we doing this? 4 kids in the back seat, my baby brother in the middle, and the bags in the in the top, tied up with ropes, like my husband always says. He sees movies, and when he sees things on cars, and he goes, oh yeah, that's a Latin family, there they go, and that was us. All the bags up in the car. My father always carried cash, so he took whatever cash he had. That was all we could take, and we left because he wanted to protect us. Going back years before, my mother, when my grandfather wanted to separate my dad from her, again, I said he purchased a green card, right? Well, years before, by the grace of God, my mother had thought, I'm going to apply for my family to be legal in United States of America. So she had come, left us for a few, I believe a couple years, worked in LA to apply for all us 5 kids and my father to become legal into the country. I remember going to an interview to the embassy in the United States of America that said, interviewed us, why do you want to go there? We didn't know what to say. We were like, I don't know. Mom and dad want us to be legal over there. We were approved, but we had no plans or idea that we were going to use these resources or this gift to come to this country. When we came into America, into United States of America, we were legal. We had our green cards. My dad said, we're going to my friend. I have one friend in Utah that he says we can come there. We drove in the middle of the trip coming here. We lost 2 of the bags. Oh. And we had no idea how and why someone stole them, or did they fly out of the car? What happened? One of them was my mother's with all of our childhood pictures. Because my daughter said, can we have some PowerPoint with pictures of how you grew up? We have none. Because back on the day, if you remember, we only had the pictures. We have no history on an iPhone, right? At all. We lost all of that. And their clothing. My older sister and my parents' bag were gone. Drove, it took us about a week to drive, fights between the siblings and what we were gonna eat. Where are we gonna sleep? I remember them paying maybe for a motel here and there, one room for all of 7 of us, because they were really counting their pennies of what they had. Got to Provo, Utah, and the car broke down. And we were like, oh, and it's January 16th that we left, so a week later. So we're driving through snow. We have never in our life seen snow or what cold meant. My husband says that to this day. You don't know what cold means. Well, I do know what cold means. We had no clothing, no gear, no nothing to prepare for this trip. Car broke down, called his friends. They were amazing people, angels from heaven, came to pick us up, brought us clothing from their kids. They had 4 kids of their own to give us jackets, gloves, whatever we needed. Drove us to their home. Car stayed on the freeway side. I have no idea what happened to that car. We went with them, stayed with them for about 10 days. My parents are very prideful people. They did not want to take advantage of anybody. They wanted to see how are we going to get ahead? How are we going to make life, right? So tried to find a job immediately. Their friends helped us immediately take us to Social Security, get our Social Security numbers, see how we're going to find jobs. My mother and father, thanks to the Mormon church, helped us finding jobs. My dad started working as a laundromat. At the time, it was a laundry for hospitals. So they would bring all the laundry from the hospital every morning, and he would wash it. And then my mother would help sort it out and fold. Immediately, shortly after that, they got my older sister and myself working in the laundromat, so because we needed the income to help with how are we going to get something. 10 days into it, we rented a house, not by working, but because of the cash that he had. We rented a house, and we bought a very small car. I don't even remember. It's maybe a Honda, a Toyota, small car. It's very emotional at times when I remember. I try not to remember this life because it's not what I had at the time. And so we started working. We went to high school. They put us into high school. We lied about my age so I could go into the high school to learn English. We have no idea how to speak English. We did not anything. And the school's idea was, we're going to put you in front of the class so you can learn and train your ear, right? How to help to understand, at least. And so we did that. We did what it took. Before school, 5 a.m., we would go work, go to school, come back. After school, we would go to work, fold clothing. I'm a perfect folding everything, by the way. My husband loves it because his clothes are perfect. He loves his shirts folded and everything. Anyway, we worked. We made it through the time. Wasn't easy. We rented a house immediately 10 days after. The house had nothing. We were sleeping on the floor. We maybe donated the Mormon family, the Mormon church. They were extremely, and I am to this day grateful to them. They welcomed us in a way where they gave us food, boxes of, when you donate the cans of food, that was us. Coming from the world that I came from, to feeling that people are giving me something and that I'm depending on that. And sleeping on the floor, cold, but not wanting to complain either because I knew my parents' sacrifice. They had never in their life had worked. And now my dad's getting up at 5 a.m, going to work, cold. My mother has never, her life was supposed to be to marry someone into wealth and never in her life work, which, by the way, that was my father's dream for us. I remember when I was in school and looking for a job, and my father said to me, you will never work. You will meet someone and you will be home, married to someone that will support you, and you will never work. My daughters will not have a job. That's the culture, and that's the life. Years later, guess what? My father's the one asking me to go to work and telling me we had to go to work because we had to contribute to the family. We had to survive. And as that goes, we're working, we're trying to make the family survive, help each other out. Comes to the point where I remember my mother crying every day and all the time and thinking, we have the budget this week is $40 to eat. And going to the grocery store with a calculator and knowing, okay, the milk, the eggs, is it gonna add up to that? Are we gonna make it? Are we gonna, what is she gonna make to eat this week? Coming from maids and not worries, right? So I don't know that it hit me ever until I talk about it. At the time, survival mode. You do what you have to do. And we did. We did. We were a close family. We helped each other. My older sister could not handle it. She went back to El Salvador. She was done. She was 18. She turned 18, 19. She said, no, I don't want this life. She went back. My parents and I stayed. We then moved to California because my dad thought California had better wages, better life. We can make more money. Needless to say, it cost you a lot more. She did not add one to the two, but we did. He went. He was a landscaper in California. I remember watching my father working as a landscaper and thinking, and crying at that point because I felt like I had never seen my parents work, ever. And now he is the landscapers that we see out there. And my father would have never done that until we came here. But he did. He did to support us and to help us. And then I started working so that between the two of us, we were able to rent a house in California. We were able to bring the rest of the family to California and try again to survive the life the opportunities, I have to say, that America, United States of America has given us. Because I never thought, now that when we talked, my parents went back, by the way, they ended up going back. They couldn't handle the life. My father still was able to hang on to a small land of coffee that they owned. And they went back, they sold it, and he started all over again. And a couple years later, I think this is very important, he won the lottery. My dad did. He did. And he bought my mother one of the homes that her family had lived in that she never, ever thought that she could ever own again. And he brought her to sign papers for that home and gave her the pencil, the pen, and said, honey, it's all yours. This is a gift from God and from him to my mother. And that's where they live today. A home that the family have owned forever. And this is where I go back to. And so that's the gift. And then, like Karla says, 40, but think now. And yes, I think now, 40 plus years later, I met a man that is my life and has given me more than I thought. He's been my angel. I used to pray for an angel. He is my angel. He saved me. He gave me the life I have here today. And the blessing of 5 kids, 4 daughters, 1 son. And then I think in the blessing of their husbands. I'm like, I could never in my life, I wish the other ones were here today, because I could never, ever, ever in my life have dreamt that they could marry men like them. They are a blessing to our lives, and my daughter too, to my son. And it doesn't end there. Then I end up with 6 grandkids right now that are my life. And so all being said, it was all meant to be. And at the very beginning, I thought, you know what, Karla, when you ask me to speak and you say, it's about immigration, it's about how people get here, I said, my story is very unlike other stories of coming to try to survive. Yes, we were coming to try to survive, but from having everything to having nothing. People that usually come have nothing to having everything here, right? To having those jobs. So very different story. I am grateful to what I have. God has given me, my family, my life now. But it's very, again, very different story. And I hope I said it right, Karla. I know that we wrote a lot. I didn't even use my notes. I said, I'm gonna read them because I don't even know what I'm gonna say. But
There you go.
it's a gift. And thank you so much. And I wanna thank especially you and you and you, because I know you guys so well. Thank you so much for taking the time to be in here. Thank you. This is who we are today and where we come from. Thank you.
So as I said, I work as an immigration attorney. I work in a firm in Portland, Oregon. I started in California and came here. What I primarily do is removal defense. So basically what that means is I try to stop people from being deported from the United States. They go in front of an immigration judge and then I try to argue why they should be able to stay here. It's very difficult work in immigration law. In the legal community, they say that the most complicated area of law is tax, and the only one that can compare is immigration law. It is very, very difficult. So with the idea of the speaker series, what I wanted to touch upon again was the crisis that we have, the United States has at the southern border. And it hits close to home for me because while my mom did not come here on asylum, it is a very similar story. So I just wanted to explain what asylum means and what you think of when you hear these terms. Refugee law and asylum law are different. Refugee law means that you're trying to escape persecution from your country and you apply before you come to the United States. Asylum means that you came from your country to the United States and you asked for asylum to, again, escape persecution from your country. So if you think about the state of the world right now, and everywhere that they have wars, Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, everything that's going on in Venezuela, Haiti. There's so many things that are not publicized in American media, but that I have to deal with consistently. So I deal with a lot of asylum seekers. So what that means is that's people that are escaping persecution in their countries. They come to the southern border of the US and try to get refuge here. They ask for asylum, and what do we do as a country? A lot of times what they do is they go through a credible fear interview. So like, is there a reason, or are you just trying to escape the fact that your country has poor economic conditions, right? If there's actually a sign of persecution or harm to that person, then we do allow them to come into the United States, and they're immediately placed in removal proceedings or deportation proceedings, meaning they can come in, but we're still going to try to deport them. So they're going to have to prove their claim, prove that you merit asylum or that you need safety in this country. There's very different kinds of asylum. Again, immigration law is super complex. What I will say, this speech was supposed to be done in December, but unfortunately we had to reschedule, so my statistics are a little bit behind, but they'll still work. As of December of 2022, the United States had 1.5 million asylum applications pending. So what that means is that there's 1.5 million people in this country who are trying to get asylum in the United States, but they're waiting for a hearing to determine whether or not they'll be able to stay. So I can speak to my own experience there, which is only in the Bay Area of California and Portland, Oregon. Typically, on average, what we're seeing for these people who are coming in and trying to determine if they can stay here or if they will be deported back to their country, the average case will range anywhere between, I would say, 3 to 10 years. It's very different depending on what's happening. Obviously, the pandemic affected this. The courts were entirely closed, and we got even more of a backlog. Right now, as an immigration lawyer, if I have a new person who just came in, let's say they came in yesterday, and I need a hearing to determine their asylum case, to see if they are actually eligible for asylum, are they actually fleeing persecution, do they merit asylum in this country? The earliest available hearing date, at least here in Portland, Oregon, is towards the end of 2026.
Where are they, like, in the meantime? Are
Yeah, do they
actually,
stay here?
You can
Illegally
qualify.
or how do?
It is illegally. You do not have status. You do not have legal status while you're waiting. You can get a work card and a social security number.
Okay.
Not all of them.
Yeah.
Again, it's complex. But for asylum law, basically, if you come in, you have to wait 6 months before you qualify for a work card. There's also different kinds of asylum. So again, what I'm generally talking about is people who are coming to the southern border and saying, please help me, I cannot go back to my country. Mind you, I see clients that are from Ukraine, again, Kenya, like all over the world. It's easiest, all over the world, they kind of already know this. It's easiest to get a visa to Brazil or Peru, South American countries.
Central America.
Central America. So they go there and then they come up to the United States and crash the southern border. We had a huge influx from Ukraine when the war started, right? But they're still coming through the southern border. So they come in, again, we let them in, we say, you're gonna go into deportation proceedings, so here's your hearing date. Hire a lawyer, which is gonna cost you anywhere between $20,000 to $35,000, could be more if you're in the Bay Area of California, New York, Florida, absolutely. You have to wait 6 months before you can get a work card. Mind you, I actually just sent a client because they didn't qualify for a work card yet, right? They've only been here for 2 months. But it's a mom, single mom, 2 kids. Where am I supposed to live if I can't work? So I'm trying to send her resources for housing. A lot of cities, a lot of counties, you can't unless you have a valid social security number. But you're not going to qualify for that until 6 months into the process. So our system is broken. That's nonpartisan, that's just the way it is. But that's how it goes.
What's your caseload look like?
Oh, it's a lot. My firm, for my firm, I manage our litigation department. So I manage 5 attorneys who work on this kind of case. This is only one example, by the way. I'm focusing on asylum because it's parallel to what my family did to come here. The firm is handling about 360 cases right now. Again, those cases can last from anywhere between 2 years up to 10 years in trials. But imagine if you're here for 10 years, is your evidence still going to be available? Is your country conditions still bad? Or are they fine now? Yes, sir?
I am racking my brain when we hear about, and obviously I am very ignorant of what you see in the news, people coming across the border that have nothing. How do they afford a $25,000, $30,000
Great
retainer
question.
fee?
They don't. So there's a lot of nonprofits, fortunately, especially in the state of Oregon, which is fantastic. But those attorneys are handling probably twice the caseload that I am, and they're probably paid half as much as I am.
So then how do they get from border, and we keep hearing about Texas, Oregon, that's a long way.
Absolutely. So there's certain states like Texas, you've probably seen headlines in the news where Texas is sending buses to New York or buses to DC to, mess with the politicians. They can do that. However, the only way you're going to get released from the border is actually if you can be released to a certain family member or person who's going to claim responsibility for you. So a lot of times it would be like my cousin coming from El Salvador saying, I'm threatened by gang members, they're going to kill me if I don't start working with them. They'll get to the border, they're going to be detained, and then they'll say, I have a cousin in Oregon, here's her address, here's her phone number, please release me to her. Now, they're going to release that person, but it's up to them to figure out how to get here. And it's also up to them to show up for their court hearing, because if they don't show up, it's an automatic order of deportation. And that's where you see on the news where ICE will go and knock on the door and physically take people into a van. Here in this area, they drive them to Tacoma and put them on the next flight to their country. We have flights to Mexico from Tacoma 3 times a day. We have flights to Guatemala twice a day. Guatemala was declared by the Trump administration a safe third country. So even if we're deporting people from El Salvador, Honduras, Ecuador, wherever else, we're deporting them to Guatemala and saying, figure it out, good luck. We actually deported someone from Italy, and finally we deported them to Guatemala, and that got news attention, but not that much. So, elements of asylum. What does it take to get asylum in this country? Again, in my opinion, my mom's case is actually like a very textbook case of asylum, right? It is persecution because there was a very obvious civil war. What we have going on right now in Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, those are very obvious civil wars where those people could probably find asylum, probably not get to the United States, that's way too hard, which is why countries like Turkey, Germany, France have a lot of asylum issues as well, or an influx of immigration for asylees. But most of the time, what I am dealing with as far as Portland, Oregon, are cases from Africa that have to do with religious persecution, cases from India, which can be political or religious persecution, and me as a native Spanish speaker, I handle the majority of our Latin American clients who are not necessarily escaping political persecution. What's the problem is there is gangs, cartels, general violence in those countries that those governments are unable to control. However, it is very difficult to get asylum in the United States if it's not the government who is persecuting you. You have to prove elements of asylum. So this is often a common thing that I tell my clients. My clients will come to me and say, I've been persecuted. Okay, it can be anywhere from a threat to a murder, to torture, to sex crimes, all of it. From the light to the very, very dark, nightmarish things. But what I always have to tell them, it doesn't matter that you suffered persecution, that's not enough. If that was enough, then all of Latin America would come to the United States and get asylum. There's other elements that you have to prove in order to get asylum in this country. Before I get into that, I do want to give you an idea. So this is, again, these are the statistics from July of 2023 for the year 2023. So think of it for just those 6 months of 2023. I selected a few countries. From Mexico, there were, in those 6 months of 2023, nationwide across the United States, 608 cases for asylum were granted. That's 4% of the amount of people who applied for asylum. I did El Salvador because my mom is from El Salvador. In those 6 months of 2023, only 10% of cases were granted from El Salvador. Venezuela, I don't know if you know much about Venezuela, but Venezuela has a very clear political issue right now. They have a dictatorship where they are actually persecuting their own people. They're withholding food, water, medical resources from anyone who opposes their government. It is an actual internationally recognized crisis in that country. It's not just gangs, it's not general violence. It is the government that is persecuting their own people. So anytime I get a client from Venezuela, in my head I'm like, perfect, this is a slam dunk case, I'll take it. They approved 29% of cases for asylum from Venezuela. India, again, in India we have a lot of different religion issues in India because there's a lot of states or provinces in that country. The government is Hindu, whereas we have a lot of Muslim and Christian populations, among others. They did approve 40% of the asylum applications in 2023 from India. Ukraine, 50%. Wow. Which is actually still shockingly low if you think of what is the blatant crisis in Ukraine in 2023. Only half of those people were able to be granted asylum. If you're not granted asylum, you get an order of deportation. So you need to leave the United States within a certain amount of time. If you do not, you are at risk of, that's where you see on the news again, ICE is going to knock at your door, armed, put you in a van, they're going to drive you to Tacoma, and they're going to put you on the next flight out to your country.
Is there an appeal process?
There is an appeal process available to those who can pay for it. So again, an appeal has filing fees, and it also has attorney fees, if you are lucky enough to be able to hire counsel. You can do it on your own, but you're not going to win. The appellate rate of overturning the asylum decisions is even lower. I won't say the exact statistic because I don't know it. Again, I can speak from my own experience. The Portland Immigration Court is known as a very liberal court for asylum applications. And right now, as of the statistics for the end of 2023, we are granting about 26% of asylum applications, which is very generous. because if you look at places like Atlanta's a big immigration court, their statistic, 3%. 3% of asylum applications are granted in court. The rest of the people are being removed from the United States.
From your legal perspective, when you hear of the Ukraine, to us, very clear. From your perspective, are there clear like delineations between those that were approved and those that weren't approved?
Yes, and that's exactly what I'm about to get into.
Okay.
So again, what I always have to tell my clients is just because you suffered harm, that doesn't mean you're gonna win asylum. You can't, that's easy, right? To say I suffered harm. But think about it in the sense of El Salvador, okay? Country that's my family's country, they have a lot of problems with gangs right now. So if somebody, a client from El Salvador says, I left because I was threatened. Someone came to my door and told me if I don't leave, they're gonna kill me. Or someone said, you know, stop me at gunpoint, took all my stuff, and let me go. Well, that can happen to you in downtown Portland at 11 p.m., so you're not gonna win asylum. Harm is not enough. These are the elements that you have to prove. This is what makes it difficult. You have to prove harm. It doesn't mean that you have to have suffered harm in the past. You can also prove that you're going to suffer harm in the future. So for example, in a country that is predominantly Islam, if you are Christian and you can show a pattern of persecution against Christians, you could still prove it even if you yourself have not suffered that kind of harm. Okay, that's the easiest part to prove, is either you have suffered harm or you will suffer harm. The second part is persecution. The harm has to rise to a level of persecution. It can't be a threat. That's not enough. Or even just, again, if something that can happen to you in downtown Portland is happening to you in your country, not enough for persecution. You have to prove that it's real, grave harm. But who is the persecutor? So again, in countries like Venezuela, it's easy because the government, it really is government officials that are going to beat you if you are protesting against them, right? Or they're going to withhold your resources as the government of those countries. Whereas in countries like the Northern Triangle, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, where it's gang members, that to our government is general violence. Gang members are not government. So it doesn't matter if you were persecuted by a government, you call the police or call whoever, law enforcement in your own country, and they should be able to protect you. That's what makes it difficult. Now I can submit articles upon articles that say that gang members have not only infiltrated law enforcement, that there's corruption in government. So we should look at gang members like government, but it's a very, very hard battle to win. The most difficult part is what in the legal community we call it nexus. So you have to have a connection between your persecution, the harm you suffered, and the reason why. Because asylum law only protects certain grounds. We protect, if you're being persecuted because of your race, you can get asylum. But think about it now, that's pretty rare. Nationality, religion is still very big, as I've mentioned before. Political opinion, that's Venezuela, textbook case, very easy. The last one, which is the legal term, and this is where we use our wiggle room, is membership in a particular social group. So if you can prove that you belong to a certain group and there's a higher risk of harm to that group than other people, then you might be able to get asylum. So the most common example of this is LGBTQ community, right? If there's a certain country that is really, really opposed to that community, then you can prove that you are part of that group, there's a higher risk of harm to you and not other people. What we try to do and are not always successful, women. There are so many countries right now where we are not protecting women from domestic violence. Men too, but a lot of it, I mean, I can speak again, just towards El Salvador and my culture, still very machismo, which means like very male-dominated, patriarchal, all of that. There's no protection for women from domestic violence. So we would try to make the argument to say, this woman suffered severe domestic violence throughout her life. The government of El Salvador refuses to protect her. You know, she called the police 18 times, nothing has happened. So she needs refuge in this country. Very difficult case to win. State action, you have to prove that your government is not going to protect you. That's also another part that makes it very difficult. If you call the police and they at least went to your house to do a welfare check, then your government is protecting you. You're fine. Also, relocation. Now, if I get a client from El Salvador, I feel like I have a higher chance to win because it's a very small country. You probably can't relocate to too many different places. Mexico, very, very large country, a lot of different states. Fine, if you were persecuted in Michoacan, this is literally what a judge told me once. Why can't you move to Cancun and work in one of the resorts and be safe? I'm not saying I've been to all places of Mexico. I have been to Cancun and Cabo, love it. I don't think that that's representative of the entire country. So that is what makes asylum difficult to win. You have to prove those elements or you're going to be denied and you will be removed from the United States and returned back to your country.
Karla,
Yes.
given the political situation we find ourselves immersed right now, not knowing how has this impacted you? I mean, I'm thinking right now, and I don't mean to, I'm trying to be apolitical.
Yes.
The border, for instance, where are you on this? Or where have you been put on this?
Sure. So I can definitely speak to that. I will say the Obama administration deported more people than the Trump administration. So it doesn't have to do with blue or red and who's getting deported, okay? My job is absolutely impacted by the administration that we have in office at the time. Here was the difference. What the Obama administration did was they said we have a million people in deportation proceedings that are awaiting a hearing. As I said, my earliest hearing date right now is the end of 2026. The Obama administration said, let's prioritize these. Let's say anyone who is engaged in terrorist activities is a top priority. Let's get them a hearing immediately and deport them immediately. Let's take people with violent crimes, aggravated felonies, especially multiple. Let's get them a hearing. They're our second priority. Third priority would be multiple crimes. But what about all the people that have been here for a really long time and haven't committed any crimes? Let's not prioritize those people. Actually, let's dismiss the removal proceedings against them. Let's not put them in court. Let's not try to deport them anymore. Let's just ignore them. Now, I'm not saying that's the best course of action, but at least then we are using our limited resources to deport the people that do present a threat to national security or even just public safety in general. The Trump administration got rid of all of that. What Trump decided was anyone who's here illegally needs to be deported. So I don't care if they've never committed a crime or if they've committed 18 crimes. They're all going to go into the same process and they're all the same priority. With the Biden administration, we did get that back, which is called prosecutorial discretion, and that's what I mean by prioritizing people who are more dangerous versus people who are not dangerous. But Diane, as it's true, we're in an election year. This is huge for my career, my firm, and whoever wins, we will pivot into whatever that person will provide.
I think we should bear in mind that as big an issue this is, and being discussed to the ends of the earth, we are forgetting, and you gave your priorities, we are forgetting the individual. Now, we're saying because you've been robbed several times or threatened in your home, you're not liable because it could happen here in Portland. The LGBTQ, I was just telling Erica, we just had one on domestic violence that the judge refused to give a restraining order, and then the young lady is dead.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think sometimes it has to be, I agree, a case by case, but I think your parameters have to be a little tenuous, do they not?
They should be, but they're not, because the law is black, is supposed to be black and white, right? So I'll give you this example. I had a mother who, actually she was from El Salvador. She had 2 children, very young, 2 boys. She was being persecuted by gang members in El Salvador, and where they basically forced her into sex trafficking. And they said, if you don't do this, we're gonna recruit your sons to be part of the gang. So she said it did everything that she could to protect her sons. She said, fine, persecute me all you want, just don't touch my children. Did that for several years until she became desperate, and so she left. She came to the United States with her kids. So at the hearing, I handled this case, I will admit it. I was able to win her protection. But because her children never suffered harm, her children were deported from the United States. So she won status. Dad is not in the picture. These children are literally elementary age school children and are being expected to return to their country, which their mom was like, well, I didn't win because I'm not staying here
I don't want here without my
my
kids.
children.
This just points to the fact of the big word I always use on the DEI, education. If we can get all this information out to the general public, so when it comes election time, you know what the devil you're voting for.
Exactly. And so that's all I want to bring to the attention is that I feel when I watch media that I do see that there is a crisis at the border. I understand that, and I understand it probably all too well, right? There have been times where I've told my husband, like, I need to take a month and I'm just going to go to Ciudad Juarez in Mexico and help these people because I can't stand the fact that children are being separated from their parents at the border for a long time, unjustifiably, and being in front of a judge. You can put a 2-year-old in front of a judge without legal counsel and try to say, why are you scared to return to your country?
You cannot.
No, you absolutely can.
Oh, you can?
Yes, you can.
A 2-year-old?
And you can deport a 2-year-old. So, I mean, this is immigration law. By the way, asylum law is uniform across the world. This isn't just the United States. It's not just our laws, okay? This is international law. The system is broken. It is. I don't know how to fix it. What I think will happen if Trump becomes president, what he is saying right now in his political campaigns is, I'm going to close the border. I don't think that that's actually realistic. You can't just close the border. People need asylum. But even under the Biden administration, Biden actually promised a lot of immigration reform. He did bring back prosecutorial discretion, which, like I said, means that we can actually prioritize people who should be deported versus people who shouldn't be, which is helpful, at least for me. I don't have that many trials right now. But if Trump will take that away if he wins, which is fine, we'll litigate, and people who deserve asylum will still win asylum. Okay, so that's not going to be impacted. But what they are trying to do right now is to say that you cannot qualify for asylum in the United States unless you came from Mexico and applied. Because if you came from another country, you had to have applied for asylum in every other country that you crossed first.
Wow.
So that would be, honestly, in my personal opinion, devastating to the international community. Like I just said, most of my African clients get visas to Brazil. Tourist visas to Brazil apparently are easier. I don't know anything about Brazil immigration law. They give out visas to go to Brazil and then they come to the US. Now, if they did that, and that rule was instilled, which by the way, proposed by Biden administration, that means they're not going to get asylum in the United States unless they applied for asylum in Brazil and every other country that they touched on their way here. Same with people from, all over the world. Haiti always goes to South America and makes their way up. Weeks-long journeys. These journeys are now, again, media is all over the place, right? It was just 2 weeks ago where all over the media was like, we have another caravan of immigrants that are coming from Honduras or I don't know where. Everywhere knows this. There's a pathway through the Amazon where my clients describe, they know immigrants are coming through that to get to the United States. So there are now camps of criminals who will take everything that you have, who will sexually assault women, children, men, everybody, because they're so vulnerable. And they're still just going to continue their journey because they're so desperate.
It's a global crisis.
It's a crisis. It's an absolute crisis that I don't have an answer to. But what I'm trying to paint the picture of, and what I think when I speak about this, in my mom's story in relation to that, my mom didn't want to leave her home. She didn't want to come. So many people in media and when you bring politics into it, it's like they're taking our jobs. They just are slamming the United States because they just want to come here because there's better opportunities and we have more money or whatever it is that you want to call it. Most of these people don't want to leave their home. They don't want to leave their country of origin, everything that they know. Their home, their family, their neighbors, their community.
Their life, our
But
life, our
they
life.
have no other choice. That mom with the 2 sons that were deported had no other choice. What was she supposed to do? Engage in sex trafficking for the rest of her entire life while trying to protect her kids? What is she supposed to do now? Go back to it? El Salvador is a very small country. If she goes back with those boys, she will be found. They will do the same thing to her. It's completely unjust. It's what, even the judge, honestly, we have great judges in the city of Portland, thankfully. He was like, I hate this decision. I don't want to make it. He waited a year to make the decision, which he can't do that, but he did. Because he knew he had to deport the kids.
May I ask why he made that decision? Why
It's under the law.
why he could separate?
You have to. You have to prove the elements of asylum. Those kids did not suffer harm. Why? Because their moms protected them from it. Those kids,
But if they're without their mom, then how are they gonna be protected if they go back?
you can't
Isn't
you
it-
can't speculate that. So you can't say, so again, we have how many, again, I don't know if you've heard this term in the media, unaccompanied minors. Unaccompanied minors that come from mostly Latin American countries where their parents are just like, go.
Yeah.
Just go. Join the caravan, or here, I'm gonna pay this person to take you to the border and go. And it's, for me as a parent now, it's desperation to protect your child, right? Sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was curious, is that the majority of the reason of why children get separated from their parents? Because when we hear about ICE and parents getting separated from their kids, but I imagine if you're granted asylum but your kids are deported, you would want to stay together. So is that a forceful process?
It's not forceful. The mom will choose to go back with them. So what's happening mostly with unaccompanied minors, it can be any age, but typically what we're seeing is teenagers. So the parents will be like, there's nothing for you here. You need to go join that group of people that are traveling to the US and try to get there. It is, I'm gonna say, quote unquote, easier for an unaccompanied minor. Now, an unaccompanied minor is gonna have to prove the same elements in order to get asylum in this country, but they don't have to go through the court process. They can do it through an interview process with an officer. So it's just less adversarial. You don't have the ICE attorney who's trying to say, you need to be deported because of this, this, and this. It's just an officer who's trying to gain information. There's also, though, there are families who are separated at the border. Let's pretend I go with my husband and my 2 boys. My children are 5 and 3 years old. Typically what's gonna happen at the border is they're gonna put me and my boys in a family shelter. They'll take the male and put him in a male shelter, right? The males are deported very, very quickly, or processed. They might be able to enter. During the Trump administration, you saw all of that media attention of kids being locked in cages and da-da-da-da-da. The United States literally lost over 500 parents of children. So we had 500 plus children detained at the border. We lost their parents because we deported them and we don't know where they went. So they may have been from Honduras. We deported them back into Mexico, saying go back. But we still have their kid in process. So now we don't know what to do with these children. They're still in process. And technically, children do have certain more protected rights, right? We can have them stay here and go through a process. Maybe someone wants to sponsor them. But where are their parents? And their parents just are immediately going to lose their legal rights to custody? How do we find them? These people don't have phones, a home, an address. Sorry, sir, you were first.
Well, I was just thinking, I've always wondered about if you're coming across the Rio Grande, you hit the banks and, and they pick you up, and they take you in, and you ask for asylum, and you're a family of 4, and like you said, they separate you, but what's that period of time, you're saying, talking about 2 to 10 years, before you come up in front of a judge? Are you just dependent on organizations?
This is a very good question. So let's pretend exactly your example. A family of 4 crosses the river. What they have just done is they crossed illegally. So they're going to be processed very different. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to go to the border, to the port of entry, and say, I need asylum. But the Trump administration, they started the Remain in Mexico program. So it created the huge backlog of people who are coming to the border to say, I need asylum. What he said is, that's fine. You have to wait in Mexico until we can interview you and process you to make sure you have a claim. And then we'll let you in to go through the process, right? And what that created was a bunch of border camps, refugee camps along our border. And what did that do is organized criminal organizations in Mexico targeted those borders because these people, again, vulnerable, no protection, nobody cares. Those people who are allowed to come in, what they do is they get a hearing date in whatever state, right? So the only way they're gonna be let in is if they have another family member or someone, an address where they can stay. There are people who are detained at the border and will remain detained until they can see an immigration judge. Those people usually have been deported already or they have crimes. Okay, so they stay detained. Most people will come in and they'll say, okay, you know Christina in Wilsonville, Oregon. You're gonna go live with her. We're gonna mail you your hearing date. You need to go hire a lawyer and fight your case. And this is where I'm saying it takes 2 to 10 years. So that person will come and live with her in Wilsonville. They won't qualify for a work card or social security number until 6 months after their application was filed. How do these people come up with money? I have no idea.
Well, I mean, I don't see any way that, I know from the fact that a lot of those people that are undocumented are out there picking berries and picking
Absolutely.
fruit.
Yep, you can get them. However, if you work illegally, it's gonna cut against your application.
Oh.
Because the judge will say, every application in immigration is discretionary.
How will the judge know?
You have to tell the truth, and the application is gonna ask you, where have you worked?
Oh.
You can't lie on that.
How did
or
you
will
survive?
immediately- Exactly. So you can say that, you can say like, I had a family, I have 2 kids and a wife. I had to work in order to put food on the table, or my family's in the store. Sorry. Right, but it's discretionary. They're gonna weigh the positive factors against the negative factors. And that will be included. I just had a client who's deported, who's been here for over 30 years. He did commit crimes, but they were back in '96. I thought we were gonna win. And the judge ruled that he should be deported because he has violated the laws because of taxes. He filed taxes for 20 years in this country, but he admitted on the stand that he left off about $5,000 of cash every year on his tax return. So she found that enough grounds to deport him on discretion, which is true. We need to file taxes. We need to obey the laws of the United States, especially as an immigrant. But I mean, I've expensed some things that probably shouldn't have been expensed. I don't know. Is that really a reason why we're deporting someone? Also, this person has the education level of a 6th grader and went to a tax preparer who advised them.
And also on the criminal aspect of people coming in, are those crimes in another country?
They will screen for that, absolutely. But what I'm talking about for the prosecutorial discretion and prioritizing are crimes committed in the United States.
So, yeah, but I mean, if I came across the border and I haven't been in the United States very long, are they able to go back and
You'll be fingerprinted,
fingerprint?
yes.
So
Immediately.
they'll run that through the country of origin and maybe every country that you come through, because some of these people take years to come through.
Correct,
those
and there's
countries.
also a lot of countries who won't fingerprint you if you're arrested.
Right.
So you're right, like, yes, we can miss that. But it's called a credible fear interview. So the officers at the border are trained to solicit the information that they need to make a determination. Those officers are human, they are not lawyers, they are CBP officers, Border Patrol officers. So some of them really want to help, some of them really don't, some of them are tired of it. Right, so they do the best that they can. It's an imperfect system. Sir, did you have a question?
Yeah, without getting into politics, but I think, you do a very good job of putting things into black and white. So, do I leave this discussion with the impression that the difference between the previous administration and the current administration isn't much? And perhaps the prosecutorial
Discretion.
Discretion that was brought back, but other than that, they're pretty even.
Correct.
So-
That is absolutely correct. So immigration law is often decided by case law. So it's not always that the president can make decisions. They can. Look at what Obama did with DACA, right? And then Trump tried to take DACA away. DACA was an executive order. DACA is what is deferred action for childhood arrivals. So it meant that kids that were brought here by their parents when they were 2 shouldn't be punished because their parents made a decision to bring them here illegally. DACA recipients still have no path to legal status. They can't get a green card. One of my very good friends from law school had a full ride to the same law school that I did. He's from Portland. Full ride because he's a genius. But he's DACA. He was brought here when he was 2. His mother is a single mom, 5 boys in Beaverton, Oregon. He is unable to be an attorney in the state of Oregon because he doesn't have legal status. Even though he graduated law school, had a full ride, genius person. Biden administration made a lot of promises for immigration reform and law. You gotta go through Congress. It's very complex. So I'm not going to stand here and criticize any administration. It's always going to be complex areas of law. And again, the majority of cases that impact realistically the groundwork of immigration lawyers is going to be made through court, litigation, case law. So rarely reaches the Supreme Court. It's mostly the Ninth Circuit that will dictate that, or the Board of Immigration Appeals. Administrations will make a difference. Again, if Trump says, I'm going to close the border, we're going to see what that looks like. But yeah, what you're hearing is correct. The Biden administration did not change almost anything for immigration policy. Yes?
Yeah, so of those that are deported, do they try again? I guess I'm curious about what the repeat, and what process would they go through? If they were deported, they came back to the border, they were trying again?
Okay, so if somebody is ordered deported, they can appeal. Okay, you can appeal to buy a few more years. The appellate process is very different and it's much faster. So I will completely admit to you, I have clients who say, I know I'm going to be deported. I know I don't have a good asylum case. I just want to buy as much time as I possibly can in the United States in order to work and send money to my family, right? So fine, we'll appeal your case. They pay thousands of dollars for attorney fees. What they say is, oh, it's like paying rent to stay in the United States. The appellate process is much faster, and ultimately they will be deported. It's way harder in the appellate courts than it is in front of an immigration judge. And they will eventually be deported. Now, can they try again? Technically, yes, but something very, very, very egregious had to have happened. So my father was killed in front of my eyes, right? So I had to come to the border because I don't know what else to do. They're going to be detained while they are presenting in front of the immigration judge. They probably won't be released. A lot of times what we do at the border, if someone already had an order of deportation, we just reinstate the order and say, no, you've already done it, can't come, sorry. Now here's another order of deportation, which just creates a higher barrier for them. It is possible, I have seen it, where clients will come back and say, no, now I actually really do need asylum because this is what happened to me. And we'll let them come back in and go through the process again. But I do think that it's a higher standard for them to try again.
Karla, you mentioned that you wish you could go down to the border for a couple of months or a year. What would you do? I mean, how could you make a difference at that point?
So a lot of the people at the border are actually, they are detained and they're being placed in removal proceedings or deportation proceedings, and these judges, there are judges at the border, physically at the border, but a lot of times they're on a TV. It's like a Zoom call. They're not represented by counsel because they've been detained the whole time, so they haven't had the time or resources or even know where to call to get a lawyer. There's a statistic out there, and don't quote me on this, but it's something like with counsel, the chances of you winning are like 98% higher than if you don't have a lawyer. So that's why a lot of those people that are detained at the border are not getting representation They don't know what to say. They don't even know. Our asylum application to the United States is 18 pages long. It's only in English. It is not available in any other language. The instructions to that form are 24 pages long, only in English, not available in any other language. So how are you going to tell, I don't know, a 19-year-old who barely finished the 6th grade, here, form in English, good luck, tell us why you don't want to go back. And they don't know the requirements that I just listed to you. So they're going to say, well, this gang tried to tell me that I had to be part of their gang or they're going to kill me. Okay, well, can't you go, have you tried to go to another part of your country? No. Okay, denied. So that's what I would do. I would want to try to represent them. It's a very idealistic idea. Attorneys have done it. There are groups that go down to the border and try to serve those people. But it's a frustrating task. To the bar? You have to be admitted, yes.
Yeah, to their bar?
Yes. Well, no, immigration is federal law. So I'm actually admitted to the bar of California, and that's why I can practice immigration law in Oregon. So you can practice at the border. It's just that it's high stakes. It's an uphill battle. Like I said, in all of Portland Immigration Court, the applications that we are seeing being approved is 26%. So that means every time I go to court, I probably maybe win 1 out of every 4 times.
Karla, what would you suggest as a possible salve or balm for this situation?
That's such a good question,
I know
Diane. I don't know. I know definitively and with everything in me, the immigration system in this country, Republican or Democrat, is broken. It is not working.
We've got to take the first step.
But I don't have a solution. There's so many, honestly, the solution is make those countries self-sufficient. So they don't have to,
no
but
matter who's in, blue or red.
it doesn't matter. We're always going to have people storming the border. This also happens because of earthquakes. Remember the earthquake in Haiti that happened? And there was a huge, that's why we got temporary protective status for Haiti, was because of a natural disaster. Same with El Salvador. There was a huge earthquake in El Salvador, I don't remember what year, but then we offer them temporary protective status because they have no resources, right? But it's temporary, and then they have to go back. And what happens when your child is born here, only knows English, only knows this culture, but guess what? Your time is up. You got to go back. So I don't have a solution. I wish I did. I think about that literally every single day that I do my work. I don't see even politics anymore in it because it's not just us. Turkey, Italy, so many countries have this like dire immigration crises of people who need help, and how can we accommodate them while still protecting our own communities, right? And our own rights and families. It's a difficult situation that unfortunately I don't have an answer. I pray that someday, I don't know, hopefully there's gonna be some genius that figures out a way to keep it humane, legal.
To the United Nations?
The United Nations are the ones who write the laws for asylum and refugee law. Again, it's the same across the board. We have stateless people. There are people that exist in this world who don't have a country. I just helped a man who was born in Jordan, but they don't have birthright citizenship. So he's not a citizen of Jordan. He cannot be deported to Jordan. He was persecuted in Saudi Arabia, where he was a lawful permanent resident. But after he was he worked for one of the princes. After he was persecuted, they deported him. This man has no nation. So it's a stateless person. So now that he's here, if we deport him, guess where we're deporting him to? Guatemala, because it's a safe third world country. Yeah, exactly. It's just a broken, I don't have a solution, but that's just the reality of people's lives, and it's real, and it affects us. It affects me. My mom came to this country because she had to, not because she wanted to, but because there was no other choice. And now I feel very, very privileged to have been born here. I feel very privileged to have my children been born here. And to have what we enjoy, what we always take for granted. When there's election, I like hound my husband over his ballot. I'm like, you don't understand what people would die for this opportunity to vote. Like, die for it. And some of us don't see it as a priority. I don't know. So it's just, I'm very appreciative to this country and that I am a United States citizen, which, by the way, so is my mom and so are my grandparents. They choose to go back to the United States or to El Salvador.
But they come back all the
Yeah,
time.
they come back all the time. And to close, just with a hopefully bright little light, I just wanted everybody to know I plan to take my children for the first time to El Salvador in November of this year, and we're so excited to plan that trip. Yeah, to see my grandparents,
the culture
to
and
see
the
the
life.
house that she described. And all.
That's wonderful.
Yes, I'm excited. Thank you so much.
Before we go, since I didn't decapitate her, I do want to acknowledge Mayor Julie Fitzgerald's here. Whenever any of our city councilors are here, I like to make their presence known, because without the city council, we wouldn't have a DEI committee.
Exactly.
And without the DEI committee, we wouldn't have a plan today.
I would like to thank the DEI committee. How many of you are on the DEI committee? Because I interviewed everybody on Zoom and by the phone, and sometimes I couldn't connect Zoom, so I don't even know what they looked like, but I'll come to some of the meetings. But thanks for everything that you do. And the question, I think we have a rockin' DEI committee.
You do.
And we just keep trying to make this world better.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.